So Nando V Movies has started up his 4th annual Open Invite collab. The first one was analysing a scene from the MCU, the second was on the X-Men movies, the third was on anything involving a villain, and now this year he's announced one musical scene, basically analysing a scene from any piece of media that's aided by the music, whether it's the score, a background song, or a full-on musical number. When deciding what I was going to do mine on, I did struggle a bit to narrow down my options. At first it was going to be on the Country Road scene from Whisper of the Heart, since that's one of my favourite film scenes ever. Then for a while I was set on covering one of the scenes in the musical episode of Animation vs Minecraft, which, despite how the title makes that sound, is actually one of the most creatively told wordless stories I've ever seen on the internet. But eventually I locked down my choice when I fell back into my hyperfixation for one of my favourite shows ever, that being Community, which coincidentally happened around the time the long-awaited movie got announced. I adore this series, though it's definitely not for everyone. Season 1 is mostly pretty tame, but Season 2 gets a lot more out there with some of its concepts. I mean, we have a zombie outbreak caused by expired food, a stop-motion world caused by a character's emotional breakdown, everything to do with the paintball episodes. I can see why some might be put off with how off-the-wall the show can get. That much is even addressed in one of the DVD commentaries. There were some criticisms from viewers that the second season was too weird compared to Season 1, and NBC executives were telling the show's creator Dan Harmon that he needed to broaden its appeal. What was Dan's response to this? Well, Season 3 opens on a bombastic musical number. I honestly can't think of a better way to stick it to the higher-ups and declare that they're still going to be doing their own thing and making the kind of show that they want to make. This scene is an absolute blast. I think it's a fairly catchy song in a vacuum, and it sticks with me even more because of how rarely Community does full-on song and dance numbers. Now, sure, they've done songs before and since, but a lot of them are covers or on in the background or don't get to be played out in full, and hardly any of them go as all in with a presentation as this one. In fact, I've come to realise that one of my favourite media tropes is when something that isn't typically musical in nature has an original song like this. Even if not all the actors themselves are professionally trained singers, I still find it incredibly charming. And even still, I think all the actors sing pretty well here, especially Yvette Nicole Brown, who plays Shirley. She belts out her lines with so much energy behind them, and they're fantastic. I don't think it's a controversial take to say I think she's the best singer on the cast. The song is also incredibly funny, with so many small jokes crammed into such a short runtime without stopping for any of them, so the pacing never has to suffer. I'll discuss the lyrics in a second, but I do want to briefly touch on the visual gags. I love how the Dean comes in wearing the same outfit as Shirley, which, all things considered, is one of the tamest things he's worn. Then he's followed up by Chang wearing a suit of money. That's a fun little nod to how his actor Ken Jeong had recently made bank by being in 2 huge movies that year. I don't know if they're any good, though I don't really plan on watching them. The best of the visual gags are at the end, though. There were people dancing in the background beforehand, but here they get to go all out. There are ribbon twirlers sporting very different levels of energy, some guys just juggling for no reason, there's the Greendale human being hanging from the ceiling, and the funniest part to me is this girl in purple who gets picked up, then she is inexplicably placed on the other side of the room for the final pose, so she has to run all the way around, dodging everyone along the way, and it's amazing. Little attentions to detail like that are a staple of this show, and I love it here. What would Community be without its witty dialogue, though? The lyrics to this song are pretty on the nose, but that's what's so great about it. It's funny to see these characters in a musical theatre song and dance while saying they're going to be normal for once, even getting in some jabs at their corporate overlords while they're at it. They directly call out how the executives wanted them to have more mainstream appeal and laugh in the face of it. Shirley's verse even brings up the many times the show was on the brink of cancellation. There is one lyric I can get a bit more into though, which involves stuff that might not have been fully planned out by this point, but it's still something I want to dedicate a little more time to. It does involve spoilers though, so if you want to avoid that, then skip to this timestamp. I normally wouldn't bother with spoiling a show that's been over for so long, but one of my friends is planning to watch through this show eventually, so this is for his sake. At one point the characters jokingly mention how they're gonna live forever, and the fact that Pierce is the only main character not there to sing the line too makes it so much retroactively funnier. But also, ow my heart, you can't do this to me. I also think it's a line that works pretty well for Jeff. His fear of his own mortality is a recurring thing throughout the series. It was a fear he'd shown back in Season 2 that would later cause him to drink himself to near death in Season 5. Like, this line isn't especially deep and there's a good chance that I'm reading too much into something that wasn't fully intended, but I don't care, I still think this fits his character pretty well. I mean, the whole thing takes place in Jeff's mind after all. They reveal that at the end, but you can pick up on it early if you're paying close enough attention. There's the fact that Pierce isn't there, Britt is able to carry a tune, Annie is a lot more eager about the relationship, and there's the really small detail you have to pay super close attention to, but the most eagle-eyed viewers may just notice that in the opening shot, he's kind of flying, and yeah, no, I don't think humans can do that. Anyway, I think the sequence does give a pretty good outlook into his character, even if that's not the primary goal. He's a very closed-off person for the most part, putting on a cool guy facade. He's even initially refused to sing until he was pushed to it, but in those instances, he ended up getting really into it and enjoying himself, and this shows that he likes it even if he doesn't want to show it. And if he hated Glee before. That's some amazing character development right there. He's also wearing a pink shirt for this scene, something he normally wouldn't do because Pierce would bully him or whatever. The contrast is shown when it cuts back to reality, showing that he's wearing a leather jacket since that fits his usual cool guy persona. It is nice to see him breaking that self-inflicted persona for once, even if it is all in his head. It gives a good indication to some of his relationships with the other characters as well. Britta's the first to show up since she's arguably the person he's the closest with. His relationship with Annie is given extra emphasis, and also Chang and the Dean just kind of show up uninvited halfway through, which is perfectly on brand for them. Side note, I love that even in Jeff's ideal fantasy world, the Dean still wears his silly costumes. This is an amazing opener for season 3. It's funny, clever, well choreographed, but above all else, it's just a fun song that picks up more and more steam as it goes along. New instruments are added to each subsequent verse, culminating in a fantastic group performance once everyone's had their individual verses. It's infectiously catchy with great vocals and lyrics that I've had stuck on my head for months at a time, and I re-listen to it constantly. Though that might be partially because in group numbers like this, I like to try and see if I can pick out anyone's individual voices. Even if I'm not super into the rest of the episode since it does a complete 180 on the impact of season 2's finale, this song is still a borderline perfect tone setter for the rest of the season. I mean, their goal was to show that things would be just as fun and wacky as before, and between the air conditioning repairman cult, the Law and Order investigation over a yam, a pillow and blanket fort war, and Chang becoming the dictator of the school, I would say they do a good job living up to that. Anyway, that's all I got for now. I hope you enjoyed watching this. Be sure to go check out the full One Musical Scene playlist. It's full of essays from people much smarter and more analytical than I am. And now I should probably start mentally preparing for when I inevitably do a video ranking every single Community episode. I'll probably survive that, maybe, possibly, hopefully.